Frankie Russo, keynote speaker, author, private equity investor.
Can you tell me a little bit about your own leadership journey?
So my leadership journey started probably, I don't know, 20 years ago. I've been an entrepreneur for quite some time now, and from the jump, as an entrepreneur, I had to be a leader. Obviously, as a kid, I guess we're kind of leaders too, but in business, my leadership journey started back in probably 2002 or 2003. I had my first company, which was in the mortgage industry, which failed miserably in 2008, along with a lot of other people. And over time, my role as a leader has changed significantly, and also my approach to it has changed significantly. It started out thinking of it more like a boss that was responsible to tell people what to do, keep people on track, and it was really more of a manager than a leader, maybe even a dictator, I don't know. Never liked the dictator position, so it always kind of felt weird, and then there was a lot of times that I was in positions and asking myself questions like, should I be harder on people? But one thing that was kind of always innate was this deep desire to want to help others, which came from my background as a child. Growing up, my parents ran homeless shelters, so this innate sense of service and giving and generosity was kind of ingrained in me. But as an adult, it actually took a while for that to really fit into leadership, because it's kind of scary. You think you're supposed to do it a certain way because that's how everybody else does it, and if you're not hard enough on people, you're not going to get the outcomes or capacity out of them. And so you stay up at night wondering if you're not doing enough to get more out of people. And it wasn't until really the last 10 years that I shifted and started to realize that the best way to get 100% capacity from people as a leader is purely just create an environment and the conditions in which they can unlock and be free to have their own, what I call genius capacity, flowing. And there's a lot of things that go into how you create those conditions. But my journey's been, probably 7 different companies that I've founded, some of which have failed, some of which have done well, some of which have exited, and everything in between. It's multiple different industries. And one thing that's consistent is the way that we show up as leaders doesn't really matter what industry it is or what product it is. And I think sometimes people forget that or think that it's supposed to be some special other thing. And it's mainly because I think there's some people out there that might think the stuff that makes a great leader is the soft skills.
Yeah.
And they think, oh, well, I don't really buy into the whole soft skill concept, right? But really it is the soft skills that make a great leader.
And you talked a little bit about your successes and failure. How important is failure to growth and success?
It's funny you asked that. So most of my work now, I sold my company 3 years ago, and so most of my work now is traveling around and giving keynote speeches, and I'm working on my 3rd book. And that concept of the role that failure plays is paramount in the work that I do now. Most companies that I work with and organizations are looking to unlock what I call continuous growth. And most of the people are confused on why they're not, because they're using brute force and all the things they've done in the past to try to unlock growth again. And the problem is that most people think that continuous growth comes from success. But the truth is continuous growth comes from failure, because the success is what kills growth. Because, especially if you've been number 1 or 2 in the market in your industry for a long time, that puts you in a position to be in a lot of denial about what's changing. I call it the stagnation spiral. It's something that is the enemy of growth, and it starts with denial that we need to do something new, because continuous growth doesn't come from doing the same thing, it comes from doing something new. And while that concept is not that earth-shattering and it's easy to agree with, it's a lot harder in practice. And the way it comes out as leaders is fighting this force that's coming from a lot of the genius of the new generations, of the new thought patterns and the new ideas that seem ridiculous or too scary to try, because what if we fail? But the failure is actually the gift and the window into exactly what could unlock the next innovation. And so failure is incredibly important. And what I've learned is that if you can get into less of a stagnation spiral and more of what I call an infinity growth loop, which is made up of multiple phases that starts with getting honest. And in that growth loop, it's an infinity loop. So it's constantly being repeated and you're always going through it. It's a continuous loop. And the idea is to get aligned with the organization where every single person is a part of this loop and where failure is just equated to a single experiment as opposed to failure. It's just the next experiment that we're going to continue through the loop on. And so it becomes a thing where you redefine failure altogether as one of the most important pieces that we utilize and celebrate.
And you talk about being a public speaker. I'm pretty nervous when I go on thing, but how is it for you to be a public speaker?
It's a lot easier than it used to be. And so there's a couple things about being a speaker. They say that most people are more afraid of public speaking than they are of death, which means, which basically means that at the funeral, they'd rather be in the coffin than giving the eulogy. I used to be a lot more nervous. So part of it, like anything else, is the reps. When you do it often, it makes a big difference. But bigger than that, what makes speaking for me easy now is that I am going 100% onto that stage in the service of the people in the audience. And so when your mission is just to help them, all of a sudden it turns into more of a conversation as opposed to a speech. And that's when you start to really connect emotionally and at that heart level with people. And it's way more authentic. You're able to drop into who you really are. And the reps plus that spirit of generosity and helping others as at the forefront of the way that, like when I go on, at least 24 hours in advance, the only thing I'm thinking about is really, really focusing on how I'm going to help them and not trying to be perfect, not having no ums. It's not all these, different tips and tricks of how you're a great speaker. It's more about, do you connect with people? Nobody cares if you said 15 times if they feel connected, moved, and catalyzed for taking action and transformation.
What is it like meeting all types of people at these events?
I love it. So my personality is a little more outgoing, so I'm deeply energized by being around people, especially now that I've really focused every day of my life on what can I give to someone from an energetic standpoint. And so what you'll find is if you get into this space where you're constantly giving, you're constantly supporting, you're constantly handing it back to them with a gift, you'll find that the level of energy coming back to you is just phenomenal. So I actually call it the limitless drug. And it's this energy loop between me and other people where I'm giving and then I'm receiving and giving and then receiving. And it creates this energy source or light inside of you that is second to none of any drug I've tried, and I've tried all of them.
With the speeches, you do get probably instant feedback, but as an author, you're alone with your thoughts and ideas and all that. What is your process like for writing a book?
Well, I can tell you I much prefer speaking than writing books, but it's one of those things you got to do. It's important. It's a really important platform. And to be honest, I've never written a book by myself. I always have people with me. So editors, I've had ghostwriters in the past. Now I don't use ghostwriters like I used to. When I was younger, I was running my businesses. I could have never written books without them. Today, I'm kind of at a different spot where it's more of editors. I've got some great people like Sarah Smith on my team that are like constantly evaluating kind of the brand, the mission, and all of that. Plus another good partner of mine is Neil Gordon out of Brooklyn. And so I've got those folks and many other folks that are part of it. So it's when you're building something that's a true kind of like thought leadership platform, you probably aren't alone, and if you are, you should probably grab some people and bring them in. So it shouldn't be as lonely, And so are you writing a book?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Well, when and if you do, go into it knowing that you want to have some wingmen, wing women, or or wing furries, whatever you're into. Just wing something. Don't go into it alone, and I don't go into anything alone anymore. I've come to realize that one of the most important parts of being a human and the most powerful assets we have as humans is the herd. So you think about like that we don't have fangs and we don't have claws. So the only thing we've ever had before there was automatic weapons and bombs was each other. And there's something to be said about the simplicity of that and making sure that I'm never going into these things alone. It really also protects me from getting into too much of my own vacuum, which can be a problem in these endeavors.
Yeah, that actually brings up a good point. As a leader, how important is it to have that support system as so people don't think I'm going at it alone?
Well, I don't really care what people think, first of all, but second
Good.
of all, that's part of the thing as a leader. Now I care if they're in my if they're in my care and I'm serving them, I care what they think. So what I mean is just like the general people think
Yes,
that.
that
So I
makes
don't,
sense.
and the purpose of me doing what you just asked is not that. So what I will say is that I think it's non-negotiable that you not only have someone that is mentoring you, if not multiple people mentoring you, that you also have peers that are helping you, and that you're always mentoring someone. That is a cycle of connection and a cycle of human experience that I think is sometimes like overlooked or underestimated. Just how powerful that is, especially in business, but in life as well. But in business, like that is a critical thing, and this is what keeps us from getting into these stagnation spirals, which are also driven not just by denial, but silos that are making decisions separately and in a vacuum, as opposed to the true power of the collective. And that to me only can happen if I'm constantly looking for how am I connected to someone above me, next to me, and then someone I'm serving below me.
When I was doing my research on you, I saw a lot about love your weird, which I really like. What is that?
I mean, right? Isn't that the magic question? So, love your weird. So it started out just as this like saying or mantra that I had 7 or 8 years ago when I was going through my divorce. So it was a very personal thing at first, and it came when I was at in a lot of experiential therapy around the disconnection I had, which I didn't realize until I was going through my divorce with my own inner child, kid self. And so, love your weird. There's a lot of different people think a lot of different things. Most people think, okay, well, you don't look that weird. So the first thing I'll tell you, Michael, is that you don't have to look weird to love your weird. That's number one. Number two, the weird I'm talking about is the weird kid we were before people told us to be different, right?
Yeah.
We can drop into that in a minute. You can tell me what you were into at 5. I was an astronaut, cowboy, inventor, TV preacher, if you were wondering. But let me tell you something you might not know. Did you know that the original word weird was spelled W-Y-R-D?
No, I did not know that.
Most people don't. You see, it was back in the 1500s when it was coined, or 1400s, and it was spelled differently. It was an Old English word, and then it didn't have this negative connotation. It was Shakespeare's weird sisters that started turning it into this weird connotation, and now it's mutated again. You can see it now; it's coming out in the news. Like it's a very negative word.
Right.
People are now politicizing it. Well, you know what I found out after I already kind of was embracing this love your weird thing and thinking about what is the role of the inner child inside of each one of us, the kid inside of each one of us at work. I then found in my research that weird wasn't just spelled differently, it had different meanings. So the original word weird, check this out. It meant the power to control or influence your fate, destiny, and my personal favorite, supernatural qualities. So essentially, loving your weird is loving your supernatural qualities, or in other words, loving your genius. So
Yeah.
the word love your weird is really about loving the genius inside of each other that is not always unlocked, which is usually because of some conditions that have hampered that. Just like the same conditions of why we don't believe what we believed at 5 years old. For example, that anything was possible,
Yeah.
right? And so we lose that. And so we also lose being wholehearted. And without being wholehearted, we don't unlock our full genius. And we are not going to be able, as an organization, unlock this continuous growth, especially in the face of what's happening now with AI and everything else. So a lot of the work I do is about helping organizations augment for a future where no one gets left behind. And it's a real thing that has to be looked at right now. But even without AI and this new species coming to like change everything about the way we work, you already we had an issue here. And so Love Your Weird is this mantra. It's a slogan. It's a T-shirt. It's not something that by itself means anything, but when put in the context of that infinity growth loop that I was talking to you about, and a good way to think about it is you were probably were you a Back to the Future fan?
Yes.
Okay, here's how I want you to think of it. So remember this? Doc hits his head. It's the flux capacitor.
Yes.
He
Yes.
hits his head on the toilet. Yeah. So he hits that on the toilet. He sees the flux capacitor, and I've always been a huge fan. And it was just recently, Michael, that I started putting the correlation together. So if you think of the infinity growth loop, that's what makes continuous growth possible in an organization, right? It's a specific framework, and it's proven. Now, this is what made time travel possible. But you remember when in the first one, Marty goes back in time, meets up with 1955 Doc, and why is Marty not able to get back to the future? Do you remember?
Not offhand. No.
Okay, well, I'll tell you. So it was, remember plutonium
Yes.
was needed to run this because they needed 1.21 gigawatts. Okay.
Yes.
So as powerful as this is, makes time travel possible, just like my framework for the infinity loop makes continuous growth possible. Without a crazy level of energy and power, it's not possible. Okay? And so for this, they needed 1.21 gigawatts. They started with plutonium, then they figured out a way to do it with other things like the lightning bolt is how they got back in the first one. All right. So what I want you to think about is that the same way the 1.21 gigawatts comes from plutonium or the lightning bolt in the time travel and the flux capacitor, with the infinity growth loop, that power needed to make that loop continuous is the power that comes from the genius capacity and the collective genius of everyone in the organization. Not the people we want to hire that we're missing, but the people that are already in the organization. And the most efficient and powerful way to unlock that is to love your weird. So there you go. So that's where Love Your Weird comes from. It's like the nucleus of the framework. Yeah. And so what it looks like practically is creating a space not only where everyone can show up with their unique brand of weirdness, and there's this sense of psychological safety, trust, and everything else that goes with that, and authenticity. It's more importantly than even that, when we were 5, we had a genius level of imagination, and there's science to prove it. Okay, I don't know if you've seen this NASA study that's out. There's a NASA study that is done in the late 60s during the space race. They had created a test because they wanted to figure out who they needed to hire that had that genius level of imagination needed to make America continuously innovative and continuously grow as a superpower. All right, so they made this test, but it was super simple. They ended up giving it over the years to about 100,000 different adults. But it was so simple that this guy, George Land, who was working with NASA, he made this decision to say, all right, what if we gave this to children so that we could see if we could create a study to figure out, is imagination, creativity, this innovation, genius, is it something that is taught or is it something that we're born with? Okay? So he gave it to 1,600 kids. How many of those kids do you think tested at that genius level for the same NASA test as the adults?
A lot more than the adults.
Mm-hmm. Right? 98%.
Yeah.
Now, they were so excited they tested the same kids, all right, the sample size of the United States, at 10 years old, 5 years later. It dropped off to 30%.
Wow.
30%. Out of the 100,000 adults, 2%. 2% of them maintain this genius I'm talking about. And it's not because of them getting smarter or getting more knowledge. It's because imagination and this genius is not learned. It's unlearned. Yeah. It's unlearned. And so it's unlearned. I started studying this. I was like, okay, well, why is it unlearned? And so, a lot of people blame school, and that's part of it, right? But I'm not like on some sort of platform to blame schools. But what I will tell you is it comes from a certain type of conditioning, and in some cases, trauma. So it either is a big trauma that's happened as a child that made me abandon that kid, or it's just conditioning that slowly happened over time. It could be as simple as going to school, or just someone saying that, look, you need to be focused more on math and less on imagination. Makes sense? So all we have to do is recreate the conditions to bring that back out. It's already there. It's already there inside of each person, but we have to create the conditions. And what does that look like? It means prioritizing time to really get honest about what the problem is we're trying to solve that's keeping us from growing. And really take the time to bring everybody together on that. It's a very expensive process, by the way. And it's not, and it's very contrarian to like the everyday we're at the threshold of hell trying to survive as a business with the main KPIs like, oh, we got to make this much revenue, this much profit and loss. I've run a lot of businesses, so I understand the threat that we have as a business to stay alive. But what I have found is that if you want to grow and you want that growth to be continuous, sustainable, and not have dead bodies behind you all burnt out, we cannot use brute force doing the same thing over and over again, expecting that to work. We have to turn around and we must do something new and different, which is very scary.
What do you do to help your own mental health?
So my own mental health. So what you need to know, Michael, is that in 2008, it wasn't just my business that crashed. My family fell apart and everything went to bottom. And what I didn't tell you is that for the 10 years previous to that, I had become a drug addict, alcoholic. So in April 12th of 2008, I got sober from drugs and alcohol. All right.
Wow.
And that has been a huge part of my mental health journey. Not getting sober, but staying sober. So it turns out that, and you might know some people that struggle with addiction, and if you know them, you probably know that it's not like a one and done type thing traditionally.
Yeah.
It's this vicious cycle of trying to stop, multiple rehabs and all this other stuff. And you can't quite figure out why. They're trying different medicines, they're trying all this different stuff. And I was able to meet some people that showed me another way that really changed my life. Okay. And what happened is that I got sober, things started to get better, and that was all great. And I did some things, and I started to find like a way to get a spiritual solution to what I was trying to solve with chemicals, right? And I'm not talking about a religious or God type thing. I'm just talking spiritual in the nature of like, there's unseen things at play. And those unseen things at play could just be the power of the collective. And so I started to surround myself with people that had gone through the same thing as me, and it gave me a strength and a way forward to get out of addiction and alcoholism. However, staying sober and getting sober are two very different things.
Yeah.
A big part of my mental health, Michael, is actually continuing to help other people get sober. Right? So I do meditation, I do things like that, and I'm constantly inventorying my emotions to help me with that. I have therapists and all that, but nothing quite is the same as the people I've helped. So at this point, Michael, I've probably helped 300 plus men over 16 years get sober.
Wow, that's amazing.
Thank you. And I don't know, thank you, but I'm going to tell you why I do it, okay? Because it's not what you think. So you would think maybe, wow, what a great mission, right? What I do is anonymous. There's no power, there's no money. I don't own rehabs, I don't own sober houses, none of that stuff. So why do I do it, right? And it's not because I'm a saint. So let me tell you why I do it. I do it because there is a thing called a helper's high. Have you heard of this?
No, please.
So what do we do with mental health? We want to get into another state of mental state or whatever. So what do? We figure out the right mix of drugs or whatever to try to get there. And by the way, I have no problem with that. I love drugs, love alcohol, love all of it. I'm here for all of it. It just, for me, it didn't work to do it the chemical way, but for so many people it does. So just want to give that disclaimer. However, I need something. I got to have something. The helper's high started being studied in the 80s, and I didn't know this till recently about this study, but I lived this, and so I knew this. In fact, I actually realized that helping people unconditionally became my new drug, because it gave me so much fulfillment. It filled me with so much serenity and so much freedom and happiness and joy from that act that I started doing it more. And so even though I was busy, I have a lot of companies, I've had 2 marriages now and all this other stuff, I've got 6 kids, there's absolutely zero reason I should be volunteering to help someone, especially if it's not for some sort of weird PR thing where you got it holding up a big check. Yeah. Unless the fulfillment that comes from it, you can't buy with money. In fact, now I call it my limitless drug, Michael. And the limitless drug is helping other people as much as possible, having a level of generosity, which now then outpours into my business. So you can imagine what that looks like as a leader. It all has come, though, not from leadership books. It's come from helping a bunch of drug addicts, which is also in line with what I did as a kid, which was helping homeless people. But I wasn't able to reconcile them because I never wanted to be as poor as my parents were. I wasn't going to do the mission thing.
Yeah.
But this gave me this other thing that I could do, and it's incredible. And you know what's so neat about it is that the helper's high is science that shows that the release of certain chemicals in our brain that we get from drugs, that same release happens when we help other people unconditionally. And so I created a world, my own world, where I could be doing that multiple times a day or multiple times a week to get that drug. And go for walks, exercise, all that fun stuff is great. Nothing compares to being in the service of someone with specific boundaries of how I help them, right? They don't live in my house, but I give them something better than that, right? And it's a way out of what they're dealing with. And I'm going to tell you that work, when it's not paid, when it's anonymous, and when it's unconditional, the level of serenity, joy, freedom, and happiness that I get, which is what we really want from a mental health state, I get that. So that's been really a powerful hack for me. It was an accident that I found it, because nobody wants to be a drug addict and alcoholic, and I'm not suggesting like go that route to get to my journey, but if someone is, but I will say, if somebody is struggling with that, know that there is absolutely not only a way out, and to not have to use or drink anymore, and have that level of like, being dry,
Right.
That's and not have to go to jail and lose everything. That's the least of it. There's this other part of it that's so beautiful, and honestly, almost everything I do in business now, and everything I get involved in now, it comes from those same principles.
So how can people reach out and learn more?
Yeah, super easy. Just pick your favorite social media. I should be there at some capacity. LinkedIn's great. Instagram's great. Those are probably my two most active. And then, of course, you can Google Frankie Russo, or you can go to frankierusso.com. I do my best to try to make it hard not to find me. So please reach out, even if it's about business, sobriety, leadership, whatever it is. Reach out. I'd love to talk.